I always say that I've seen everything in football. I don't think I've ever seen 10 minutes like that.
My name's Ellie Menjum, and for the past few years I've been traversing Europe, documenting the tales of football clubs and their fan bases who've been on the verge of winning something for the first time in a long time, if not ever. From northern Turkey to southern Spain, from southwest Germany to the Basque Country, I've been on a mission to show how important it is that the game has a variety of winners so that we learn about new places, new people, new cultures, and most importantly, new stories. Then came the 2022 FIFA World Cup, where I knew the exact once-in-a-lifetime story I had to tell. So as the world's media descended on Qatar to be at the tournament, Kopanani and I decided to fly 8,000 miles in the opposite direction to tell the ultimate story of a football fan base on the brink of ending a 36-year wait for the biggest prize in sport. But what we found was a story that transcended football, a story that reached into the very soul of a nation that laid itself bare over 2 fateful weeks. A story that etched a struggle for identity in a search for glory that began over 2 centuries ago. A story about Lionel Messi, Argentina, and 45 million people yearning to reclaim their place in history. This is the all-angle, on the ground, as it happened, ultimate account of perhaps the greatest football story of our time. This is Once in a Lifetime.
Yo, Ellie, what's going on, man? Where are we at?
We are in Argentina, a very hot, very sweaty Argentina, during their first ever summertime World Cup, and I'm excited. There's only a couple of hours before the big quarterfinal against the Dutch. We don't actually have too much to do before we have to be in what is expected to be a sold-out fan zone. So first things first, we need to find my fixer Val, and then just before the fan zone, I'm going to catch up with a journalist friend of mine, Santi, who I think is the perfect person to give me an understanding of how big of a deal what's going on here is and just what we're in store for.
You tell me, first and foremost, we could have picked any country to go to cover this World Cup. We put all our budget on this one. Why do you think we did it, and was it a good idea?
Yes, it was a great idea for you to come to Argentina. Because, I mean, these people are longing for something to be cheerful about. This World Cup is like a boiling point for this national team. Because the World Cup is an obsession for Argentines. Already 36 years. That's how long we've been waiting for someone, anyone, to make us lift that trophy again. It is now or never. It is right at this moment to finally get the chance to win the trophy.
1-0 up at the break, and with a foot in the semi-final, the emotional climate of the fan zone was a collective, confident ecstasy, which was an even more notable achievement given the actual climate. You see, with this World Cup being the first ever to be played in December, it meant that Argentina were experiencing their first international tournament in their summer. And whilst that had helped create atmospheres and crowds never quite seen during winter tournaments, it also brought its own obstacles. Yet, as the second half approached and the temperature went up to another level, it was clear that no one was going anywhere. In fact, as the temperature went up, so did the atmosphere, as Argentinians young and old defied their health to show their support. And then, deep into the second half, their efforts were rewarded. And so with only 15 minutes left, Argentina had a golden chance to double their lead with a spot kick taken by who else?
Messi, who is heading into this World Cup, still at the top of his powers, but at 35 years old, which could mean this is the last shot he will ever have of trying to win the trophy he's been looking for, basically from the very first moment he put an Argentina shirt on.
2-0 up with a goal and an incredible assist from Messi, Argentina were on their way to the semi-finals of a World Cup in fairy tale fashion. And so swept up by the sun and the songs, the jumping and the jubilation, the hugs and the kisses. With only 10 minutes left, it truly felt like we had touched down on the happiest place on earth. However, little did we know what was to come.
Netherlands scored. It's gone from elation to tension like that.
Alemania,
6 minutes to hold.
Even though they still had a 1-goal lead. And with the referee adding 10 minutes of additional time, that climate of confident ecstasy had evaporated.
Argentina have given away a free kick. On the edge of the box, this will be the last kick of the game. After 10 minutes of extra time, after 100 minutes of football, you've got to be kidding me. This country can only do stressful. I don't know how many times I keep saying it, but I'll let them do it. Let them
All of a sudden, the happiest place on earth had become anything but. And if you thought regular time was emotional,
up with 10 minutes, but it's going down to penalties. 10 clear chances in extra time, but it's going to penalties. It's 50-50. Argentina prevail. It's 50-50. The football gods shine on this very football religious country. It's 50-50. Now or never. Le pega a Van Dijk, prima penale della serie, fa Paesi Bacos para abrir el Van Dijk, el Liverpool, le pega Van Dijk.
despite being only 2 penalties into the shootout, the extreme passion and emotional attachment Argentina places on this game was already on full display. And then came the next Dutch penalty.
It's like they can't win easily.
And so, after a match that had given us just about everything, Argentina were just one Lautaro Martinez penalty away from the semi-finals. Finally, after a 2.5-hour emotional roller coaster ride that only this country in this game could go through, Argentina had snuck into the semi-final. And whilst there were cries of happiness, hugs of relief, and jumping for joy, there were also tears, where it was evident the emotional toll of supporting this team in this tournament was becoming overbearing for some, especially knowing there were still 2 more matches they'd have to overcome to finally achieve their World Cup dream for the first time in nearly 40 years. And so as some hung around to hear the words of the man of the match, we left the fan zone as that 37-degree heat wave turned into something completely different and came across local juice vendor Chino, who in a sign of the dire economic times of the country wasn't able to leave his juice stand to watch the game, instead listening to it outside the fan zone on his radio.
Te decía, estaba con una señora mayor acá y cuando escuchamos el gol los dos nos abrazamos con esa viejita y gritamos los dos y yo digo, si se hace otro gol más te como la boca.
And so as we headed out to the Obelisco, where we'd been told, despite the monsoon-like rain conditions, thousands had already gathered for the traditional post-win celebrations, it was Chino's poetic words on what this all meant that made sense of it all.
No se trata ni de Messi ni de ningún jugador, se trata de la esperanza, de la gente. Hace media hora estábamos todos así, sufriendo, y en un segundo se abrió la puerta de felicidad, donde todo el mundo le importa un carajo todo o nada. Te saca de un lugar y te pone en otro lugar, es como que una puerta dimensional.
The next morning came with a combination of jet lag, wet clothes and a hangover, but mostly a sense of disbelief into what we had just experienced only 24 hours into our time in Argentina. So to start the day, I headed to meet Santi again, who wore the exact same shirt and insisted we met and did the interview in the exact same place, all for one very Argentine phenomenon.
I mean, it's the Kabbalah.
The Kabbalah, okay. I keep hearing about the Kabbalah.
It's a belief that when you did something and it worked out, you want to repeat that thing so that it might yield the same results, you know. I mean, look at me, for example. I mean, I need a shave, I need a haircut. I don't want to do any of those things because, well, not getting shaved and not getting haircuts, Argentina has reached this far into this World Cup.
But Santi wasn't the only one affected by the World Cup Kabbalah.
Vas con las mismas zapatillas, te levantás a la misma hora.
No la lavo hace un mes.
Sentamos en el mismo lugar y hacemos las mismas cosas ese día del partido.
Juega Argentina y hicimos una picada.
No usamos camiseta porque la Copa América que gana Argentina no usamos.
Y se repite la comida mientras gana el equipo.
Use the same chairs in the same order and we eat the same before every match.
Tratás de hacer todo lo mismo que hiciste el día que ganaste.
From their superstitious behaviour to painting their futsal arenas like the Sistine Chapel, it was dawning on me that the Argentinian passion for football genuinely bordered on religious fervour.
Está reflejado en Maradona, que le pasa a Messi la creación del fútbol.
But this was only the tip of the iceberg I discovered when it came to Argentine passion for all things football. From Ezequiel Sorani, the founder of Futbolitas, a creative art studio dedicated to the game.
It's not a sport, it goes way beyond. It's a cultural phenomenon that affects different lives in different ways.
To the unofficial museum of El Grafico, built into a tin shed in the countryside, that's dedicated to preserving the memory of the country's most adored football publication. To Carlos Ruiz, a man who turned his passion for sportswear into a world-famous store visited by some of the biggest names in the world. And whether their passion was expressed through footwear or photography, when chatting to them about football, there was one subject in particular that was getting them most excited.
We have the best player in the world.
Messi en este momento está despertando.
5th World Cup, my friend. Players usually play 3 at the most.
And whilst yes, they were gushing about his on-pitch performance, it was what Messi did off the pitch against one Dutch player that had Argentinians most enamored.
Un poco caliente por el final.
¿Qué mira, bobo? ¿Qué mira, bobo? Anda para allá, bobo. Anda para allá.
Tranquilo, Leo.
No one ever thought Messi could do that.
It's another Messi. He's older, he's wiser, he doesn't take shit from people.
We've seen him lash out, we've seen him complain, we've seen him, you know, be aggressive. But to be like straight looking at someone, looking at an opponent, telling them, what are you looking at? Get out of here, get out of here.
Just like in '86, Argentina once again had a leader who wasn't afraid to express how he felt. And within hours, they were celebrating it in every way they could.
This is the World Cup legacy in Argentina. Messi says one line, within days, it's on shirts, hats, mugs.
How did he get this shirt made so quickly?
You know, on Friday when the match was finished, maybe 20 minutes after, there were caps and t-shirts already on sale.
This is the power of this tournament, this sport, this player. And if they win it, I bet you it all sells out.
Day by day, we were watching Argentina's World Cup hysteria grow in more weird and wondrous ways.
Even the chicken nuggets have been World Cupified in Argentina. Every single radio station, every single one is playing World Cup.
Parecía que lo tenía resuelto, lo tuvo que resolver con los penales. Ahora, los últimos 15 minutos del alargue, lo mismo realiza el profe Luis Martín. Los jugadores juegan a mucha intensidad.
Tarjetas en un partido mundialista. Increíble. Lo cual podría hablar de, bueno, un partido donde
the walls, whether it's the radio, whether it's the newspapers, everything is World Cup. It'd probably be harder to not hear the World Cup than hear about the World Cup. But perhaps the reason the World Cup was such a talking point was because the other Argentine topic of discussion was so depressing.
So inflation, for example, it's a huge issue in Argentina.
¿Es posible del argentino intermedio, medio de su condición social, tener ahorros?
It's a really good indication of the inflation here in Argentina. We keep seeing signs like this, missing numbers, because, well, when the price keeps changing that quickly, there's no point just changing it from, I don't know, something like 1,200 today to 2,000 next month, maybe 2,500 the week after, who knows?
They can't buy houses, they can't buy cars, they can't actually make investments.
Because the money just becomes worth less and less every day.
Exactly, it's burning in the pockets.
And so as each day went by, we came across demonstration after demonstration after demonstration, all focused on the same subject.
Nos ofrecieron índices que están por debajo de la inflación. Nosotros hemos rechazado y hemos lanzado un paro en el día de la fecha que se está haciendo en toda la República Argentina.
Yet even amongst the protests, Diego was present. And even in the economic nadir the country had found itself in, reports coming out of Qatar were that no country had taken as many fans to the tournament as Argentina. And with the country now in the semi-finals, somehow even more supporters were flying out to Doha. So of course we headed to the airport to meet them. From the young and spontaneous to the old and sentimental,
Claro, yo tengo 60 años, es la última vez que puedo ver a Messi.
to the just plain crazy.
Sí, hemos vendido una camioneta para irnos. Así.
For an Argentinian to go to the World Cup, it's not pleasure, it's business.
You sold your car?
Sí, vendimos una camioneta.
Just to go to Doha. Your dad sold his car.
Sí.
Wow.
You go there to achieve an objective, not to have fun.
La situación esta que estamos todos locos, o sea, de ir a ver a nuestro país, la patria, llena de emoción.
Another match day had come around, and with it, another scorcher. This time, with the temperature predicted to hit nearly 40 degrees. But a heat wave was no match for Argentinians in a World Cup semi-final. And so with the crowd at the Buenos Aires fan zone expected to be double the last match, we sent one camera in early to find a space, whilst we sent another to roam the streets of Buenos Aires and capture the almost paralyzing effect this tournament had on nearly every corner of the capital. As for me, well, since this was a story about Argentina, not just Buenos Aires, I decided to try something a little different, heading out of the capital and across the country to see just what the rest of Argentina looks and feels like on a World Cup match day. And what I found was arguably a more intense sentiment than even in the capital.
Si no ganamos ahora, es el último. Este tenemos que ganar.
Eso tiene que ser ahora o nunca.
Y es como que por Messi también. porque se lo merece. El mundo le tiene que regalar la Copa del Mundo.
¿Por qué? Único, porque es único. Porque somos buenos y porque tenemos jugadores para ganar.
Claro, como decís, es oro nunca.
Sí.
Este ya todo nada.
And just like the emotional toll the tournament was having on those in the city,
¿Por qué no le das?
Para no ponerme nervioso.
¿Sí?
Lo voy a tomar más tranquilo, porque si no me voy a terminar enfermando, porque el tiro casi me muero.
Me agarra ansiedad. Entonces no miro, me pongo a trabajar.
and despite being in the middle of a Tuesday, every town, every village, and everyone was focused on one thing in particular.
Y Argentina camina de tal manera que ya está en la semifinal de la Copa del Mundo de Qatar. Es una locura la República Argentina, me cuentan Fernando García.
Con el ritmo acelerado, Leo, para terminar con las últimas ocupaciones del día, la gente, la mayoría, te diría hasta ahora, todos con la camiseta argentina.
And so, as kickoff approached, we jumped back on the highway and headed to the city known as the cradle of football.
I'm from Buenos Aires. When you have to look at how they feel football in Rosario, I mean, they are crazy about football in there, I have to admit it.
Rosario breeds football like no other city in Argentina, for sure.
In Rosario, probably they take football way too seriously, way too heavily. It gets crazy in there as well.
Firstly, it's the two clubs of Rosario. From the moment you enter Rosario, you understand the passion, how deep it goes. The colors are everywhere. Into every wall, every corner, every lamp post. It's all about the red and black of Newell's or the blue and yellow of Rosario Central. A level of division, a level of hate, a level of passion. It goes to a level that is difficult to understand.
Okay. There's way too much intensity.
But that's what created Messi.
You see, it was in this cradle of football that Messi was born, raised, and began his footballing odyssey.
Messi's first club was Grandoli, a small football club in the south of Rosario.
And so, with Messi's Rosarino football journey starting at Grandoli, so did ours.
What, can we go in? ¿Nervioso por el partido?
Ganamos.
¿No? ¿Sí?
Ganamos.
¿Seguro?
Por supuesto.
¿Por qué?
Porque Argentina gana. Messi empezó acá. Y acá trabajo yo.
It's mad to think, like, it all started here. At Grandoli, on that pitch where he did the same magic he's performing from 5 years old here to 35 now. But to sit here in this kind of birthplace of what could be the greatest player of all time, what could almost certainly be if he wins this tournament in less than a week. I don't know, it's magic. I could stay here all day and soak it up, but we got kick-off against Croatia in about 15 minutes. I've been invited to a party.
That party was being hosted by Farid, a talented Rosarino photographer I'd seen online, whose photos in Rosario's World Cup celebrations had inspired me to come to the city in the first place. And so as the streets of Buenos Aires emptied and its bars, restaurants and fan zones filled to capacity, we made it to Farid's just in time to strap ourselves in for another ride on the emotional roller coaster that is supporting Argentina at the World Cup. And from the first minute in, it was a bumpy ride. It threw some Argentine hands in the air and other Argentine hands on heads. It threw some of us forward, it threw some of us back. But whoever you were, wherever you were, no one was immune from the emotional toll. Some tried coping with nicotine, others with alcohol. Some even tried coping with black magic. And then And so that emotional roller coaster had come to a screeching halt, where the result of Messi's next kick would determine where we go next. 12 yards, one kick, 46 million people, a 36-year wait. Messi had put Argentina in the lead of a World Cup semi-final, and the fairy tale was back on track. And whilst I could try and explain what it felt like, the faces amongst the celebrations tell it best. And before the tears of joy could even dry, the kids in the air could even land, and the kisses could even be delivered. Once again, the faces told the story. And 2-0 up and now dominating, Argentina had a foot firmly in the door of the World Cup final. And with the post-goal ecstasy contagious and half-time called, the stress and suffering endured in that first half hour had been replaced with smiles, celebrations, chinzano, and singing in the sunshine at Argentina's first ever summertime World Cup. So, as the second half approached and I prepared for what I thought would be a celebratory 45 minutes, I found myself in for a rude surprise. As the moment the second half kicked off, the mood instantly changed.
Something I noticed throughout the World Cup is that even the way the Argentines cheer on the team, it feels like they're suffering, they're leaving, their bodies behind. They have to be mentally drained. They have to, be at the top of intensity because they are suffering. So that's how we live football. We live football through hardship. We live football through excruciating pain,
And whether it was the Argentine style of suffering as support, or the fact that 2-0 was the same scoreline they had before they imploded against the Dutch, no one in the fan zone, no one in the cafes, and certainly no one in Rosario seemed to remember the happiness of halftime. Until Messi picked up a ball near the halfway line. And he ran with it. And he ran with it. And he ran with it some more. Until he had the ball at the byline. And whilst he didn't pass it to Molina, he did pass it to Alvarez. And that's when Argentina finally let their guard down. No longer was anyone worried about the game. In fact, no one was even watching it. And so, as the Buenos Aires fan zone turned into a giant dance floor, the streets of the capital refilled with people heading to the Obelisco, and our watch party turned into a rave, I went outside to get my head around the story that was unfolding.
Take a step outside on the balcony because as fun as it is in there, it's a bit overwhelming, to be honest. I came up with the idea of telling this story over a year ago when I realised it was going to be Argentina's first Summer World Cup, when I realised it was their first since Maradona passed and he was looking down on them for this tournament. And when I realised this really was Messi's last tournament, he said it surely was, and he's played like it surely was. He's just created an assist so glorious, so beautiful, it will go down in the history of this tournament. And now this country, to actually try and fathom what happens with this country, it's a bit, I don't know what happens now in the next 5 days, to be honest. What happens now, Argentina? How do you prepare for this? How do you enjoy this? And if you win this, how do you celebrate this? We are in for something special now. I'm telling you, you thought it was crazy now. I feel like we haven't seen anything yet.
And so we hit the streets to see how Rosarinos celebrate the World Cup, where whether on the back of a bike, back of a truck, back of the bus, or even at the front of it, there was only one place you were heading, the city's own version of the Obelisco gathering, where tens of thousands had congregated, many climbing any vantage point possible to show what it meant. Meanwhile at the Obelisco, it had gone to another level, with bikes, barbecues, and brass bands. And so, as the celebrations continued deep into the night and morning, what was most notable to me were the number of young kids out way past their bedtime, partying alongside their parents, who evidently wanted their kids to experience the same Argentine euphoria they were able to enjoy 3 decades earlier. And so, as the drinks ran out and we headed back to the capital, all I could think was, how does this get any bigger? Next time on Once in a Lifetime.
You're so harsh. If he wins, will you be equally as appreciative?
If he wins, Messi is my idol. I will put a flag there that says, I'm sorry, Messi. But if he doesn't win, I can't say on camera what the flag's gonna say.